Hi, everybody out in YouTube land. What's good today? Or what's good tonight? I'm going to give it a minute for everybody to get in here. And here we are again. We had a big full week. Oh, rats. I forgot my book. That's okay. My Chasing the Thrill book. Um, let's see. I'm going to give it a minute to see if people can find me because I know I have another chat room open. I better go there. And is anyone else waiting for me in that other room? Let me see. Come on, stream. Here it is. I'm going to tell anybody that happens to be over here, there's 16. Okay, now I threw that in the chat. I see Copper Dan and Huli. Okie follow me, peeps. Thank you, Huli. I see her in the other room. Okay, and then I see JK Pioneer, Atlantic Coast, because I can. Okay, now I'm gonna jump to my live stream so I can see, or do I need to do that? Let me see how this goes. Oh yeah. It's tricky. It says set up professional audio. Why am I getting that pop up? No, I don't want to. Do I have to? Can you guys hear me? Is it fine? Okay, I'm gonna click on my live show and see the chat over here. Hi, Zozo Rocks. Hi, Mary Green. Hi, Copper Dan. Hi, Silver Sage. Hi. I haven't seen you in so long. How are you doing? And who else is in here? Tony Rusi, Uncle Titus, Lori James says Bueno noches. Miss Ford's in the house. Hey. Albert. Nice to see you, Albert. Yeah, my hair, it's so humid here today that my hair is too it's too big or too out of control. I had to reel it in a bit. So whatever, this is what you guys get. Okay. So it's my move here. I still am not over. Okay, so yes, I got the Dan Barbarisi book. I got Chasing the Thrill. And I'm a slow reader, and it's like, oh my God, I don't know where to look for the good stuff. And so my sister sent me the audiobook. So I have both the audiobook, bought me the audiobook, and I listened through the whole thing. And I still it's really good. It's really good. I would say if you are in the Fenn treasure hunt, how could you not want to read that book or know that? The most important thing I got out of it was that Jack, how close the parking lot to the treasure chest. I knew it. That was my suspicion the whole time, that it was close. And he said it was. I don't even know how it was said in the book, but that's my translation of my interpretation of what I heard or what I read about what Jack had to say. about, you know, removing the chest or whatever. Carrie Galloway says, I'm glad the book is good because I'm not interested. The audiobook is great. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wild woman will not be tamed. And what kind of whatever. Get back. Okay, so anyway, the book is great as far as this is what's going on. It's like Dan wrote it as a perspective of an outside, although he was a searcher or tried to, he was got into the community and, got his finger on the pulse of it, tried to figure out what made it tick, how it went, he was involved at that level, but he was more, and the book is more written as a overview journalistic level, definitely. Yeah, it's good, but yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Anyway, it still doesn't get us anywhere closer to solving the poem, which it's like that has to happen. It has to happen for me to let this go. I'm drinking cold beers tonight. That looks really flat, doesn't it? It kind of is flat. I'm drinking Budweiser water, Budweiser H2O again. Oh, hi, Gabriel. How's it going? Hi, Gallatin Ghost. How you doing, dear? Good to see ya. Last night, Indy told us you tried to warn her about the Blackbeard scam, but she didn't listen. Yeah, who do you know? I mean, how do you know until you're in? I mean, everybody can look in the rearview mirror and go, I told you, same thing. But anyway, earlier this week, I sent Jack an email, and you guys probably, anyone that's, I don't know, I'm just going to say it again. I asked Jack if it matters if the word in the poem and Too Far to Walk, the word is the answer I already know. In TTOTC, the word in the poem is answers in the plural form. And I just flat out asked Jack, does that matter? And he said, no, just flat out, nope, no. So, although, because I've been listening to this confirmation bias video over and over and over again, because I really do think that is our gift. It's like, here, I'm telling you how to work on this, how to use how I used what I did. It's kind of like we get to know how Jack's mind works by this confirmation bias. And he's the one that solved the poem. So I can't see listening to anybody else's how they did it, or how, it doesn't matter what any other searchers have to say. It really, to me, it really doesn't. And they're all distractions. It's all just distracting me from figuring it out for myself, right? Or us trying to, like sidestep the quit waiting and do it ourselves, or do it myself, or if somebody came and showed me the logical way that made sense, how where the clues in the book are, the hints to the clues in the book. That's what I need to know. And I also, I see my name. Hi, Nomadic Madman. Good to see you. Hi, Adam Body. Good to see you. I think that watching the confirmation bias so many times is giving you confirmation bias. It is, but you know what it did? It's like, it made me realize my own confirmation bias, because he's got tricks and tips in there. In fact, I think I've got this queued up, and I can, I have Jack's permission to show it and discuss it, right? Because the thing I learned with last week's show, and thank you to my guests that that came on, but I had people with their own agreed upon, some of them were agreed upon confirmation between other searchers. And, like everyone had their own, this is how it is, and this is how you do it. And it's really there. And so what that just made me walk away from that, or, what I took from my last show was, we got to break this down into smaller bites, I'm looking at the chat. I'm sorry, you guys, all of a sudden dead air. K-Pro, by any chance, have you read the Thor Indulgence? If so, what do you think? Hi, Tio Nut. How's it going? Okay, what I'm gonna do, I'm going over here. And I'm going over here. Okay, and then back to Zoom, and I'm gonna push this and share screen, and this. Share sound, and this. The only way to make good biscuits and gravy, there's only one way. Do it yourself, hey? Is that it? Uncle Titus, what was my number one takeaway? My number one takeaway is that I feel like Dan, I don't know, the way this all came, the way it all ended, and how convenient that this book was all written. And I mean, I can come up with conspiracy theories, and we can talk about that but can we, let's do this.
Who died of cancer. But to that person, everything that comes out of that psychic's mouth after that point is more likely to be accurate, because the person will.
And he's like, okay, so listening to this, what I'm learning from listening to this over and over, we can find coincidences in anything if we look hard enough, and let me make this big. That's isn't that true? We can find, and so when we're finding coincidences, or we're finding these things in the book, like, or even things in the poem, like words that Forrest has just said, and you found that word in the poem. Now that is a coincidence. And now how I know, I can rule out that there isn't letter counting, and it doesn't matter how many letters per line are in each of the words, all that lining up as, although Jack has already said it has nothing to do, and Forrest has said it has nothing to do with puzzles and foot bounds and blah, blah, blah. Jack goes over and over and says it again. This has nothing to do with these puzzles or trying to figure out how you would solve any other treasure or any other treasure hunt that has been come before, or this is a whole different animal. And okay, so let's go.
Dismiss it pretty easily and really take it in stride, but really hold on to the vague things he says that are right. And we're sort of in that same position with all the vagueness in Hunt. So for confirmation bias, here are some important quotes that I picked out from Forrest. If all of you have such great ideas about the solve, how can they all be wrong?
That makes me
There's
giggle.
a certain percentage of searchers that will not accept the fact that they're wrong.
Okay, that number has gotten pretty big. or how in the world did that get? I think it only got worse after they announced it's Wyoming. I think it's worse. Okay.
Playing a hunch is nearly always fraught with disappointment, especially if the stakes are high. A searcher who guesses through life is destined to carry a thin wallet.
Okay, so what this tells me, this is Jack pointing out Forrest's words about this. And what this tells me is that this is not a hunch. How he figured it out was not through a hunch. It was not through a guess. It was through confirm.
So confirmation is part of what keeps people in the chase. It hardens their belief and their confidence in their accomplishments despite spotty evidence. But confirmation bias also keeps us from exploring new ideas.
See, confirmation bias keeps us from exploring new ideas. I think so many work so hard at one thought and one idea that it's like to even consider giving up that thought and starting over, it's like, no, I would rather be wrong, absolutely wrong, than try again. You know, and I'm wrong all the time. Like, I'm so used to being wrong in my life that it doesn't I don't think I'm built a lot of the same way as a lot of other people. I don't know, because it doesn't seem that hard.
Forrest is just kind of on the sidelines here, watching us make these huge errors. Our challenge is to try not to make guesses, but find true meaning and find the true pattern. So how to combat confirmation bias?
Here, this is good. This is the whole
picture
reason.
Is of Charles Darwin, famous for his.
This is the whole reason that I wanted to do this. Like, what can we do to combat this confirmation bias that we've all have now? And get back to the most basic thing of figuring out the poem. Okay, here we go. Oh, I clicked the wrong thing.
His theory of evolution, and he had a very interesting mind. It said that he was not the most intelligent person, but he had a great work ethic for the problems at hand.
What did he just say? This person didn't have the most brilliant mind. Who is this, Darwin? But he had a great work ethic. And I see those Araxes percept. Don't believe Jack, but why not? I'm learning from him, and he is telling me, here's what Darwin used. Try to do whatever you can. If I can learn from Jack, why not? Especially because we're the ones, he's the one that we're being presented with as the person that knows the answer. The only other person that happens to know the answer or knew the answer is now gone. So this is our closest we have. And he's telling us, try to do whatever you can to disprove your solve. Right? Okay.
Actually had the basic tenets of evolution down before he published The Origin of Species. But he spent decades looking at not only evidence that supported his theory, but the things that could potentially disprove his theory. And he came up with a process, a golden rule for.
Okay, this is what I'm doing. Here's what we're getting to. I'm going to use Darwin's process to combat confirmation bias via what Jack has told us here.
Combating confirmation bias, and I'll read from him here.
Okay.
I had also during my years followed a golden rule, namely that whenever a published fact, a new observation, or thought came across me, which was opposed to my general results, to make a memorandum of it without fail and at once. Okay,
and so when something comes across where you're just like, no, like I just missed no, like when Dave Brenshaw was on the show last, and he was telling us he's worked with Mario and Tim and other people, and they've come up with this sliding the poem all line to the left and finding words, like almost like a word scrabble, or not a word scrabble, but a, finding words in the poem. I wrote that down because I after listening to this, I thought, okay, putting the letters of the poem in a grid. I wrote that down because it's against what I believe is the right way to do it. And I wrote that down and made myself think about that, because it's just like, nope, I just discount that without even thinking about it. And so I'm trying to combat my own confirmation bias here. And this is what, so when I asked Jack about it made me think of the word answers and answer, right? And that's when I sent him that question about it. And so to me, I just ruled out that whole thing of finding words, counting letters, or lining up the poem in a different way. I discounted that by Jack telling me that that extra S didn't matter. So now, because I forced myself to think about it, now I'm taking that off the table. I've evaluated it. What I did, and also Davio's approach was counting words. And I didn't, I wrote that down because it's like, I don't think so, because what are we counting words for? I mean, where does it say count words, right? And then I started thinking about that line in Surviving Myself, where he says on page 41, the bottom, starting at the bottom, as the crescendo built, everyone guessed which song would be number one. The bottom would, and so when you I can see where he got that idea, and it is real in the book. So I am not crossing counting words off my page, or off my list of confirmation biases. Like, okay, I'm positive that, but I don't have any proof. It's like, I'm so positive that counting words isn't the way to do it, but I don't have any proof of that. So I have to keep it in, right? It has to be an option. But is the word answers really the 41st word from the bottom? And then page 41 is, if the word answers is page 41, and the 41 on page 41, it talks about the number one being at the bottom, that is a legitimate clue. Okay, let's go back. Let's see what else he has to say. Oh, I did it again. I pushed the wrong
For I had found by experience that such facts and thoughts were far more apt to escape from memory than favorable ones. Owing to this habit, very few objections were raised against my views, which I had not at least noticed and attempted to answer. So what he's describing here is a form of intellectual bravery. These theories that he has worked on for decades, he's willing to give them up if he can prove them wrong. And that's the same sort of thing that we need to do here. We need to be open to information that would seem to discredit our solves. And if our solve is able to withstand that scrutiny, then it's all the stronger for it. And we're actually more likely to find the treasure. But if it is disproven by that information, we should welcome it.
See, now I really like that. No matter what you think, this approach is so logical. It makes so much sense to me. And so if we can continue to do this, if we can rule in, rule out, okay, you know what? I just thought of another question. Okay, I'm going to write this down because that's what you're supposed to do is say, Jack. To ask Jack, does anybody know? I want to know, did he, when he was working on the poem, I'm writing this down, did he find the clues in order? Like, did he find where warm waters halt first and how that was found, and then that led him to another one? Or did he find Homa Brown or the blaze in the book, or or when he's solving? I'm talking about solving the poem, not actually going out boots on the ground. I think you have to solve the poem and then follow the steps, but to does anyone, did he find out what warm waters halt first? I remember what Forrest had to say about that. He said, once you find one of the clues, the others get easier. And so if that is the case, it doesn't necessarily mean when figuring out the poem that you have to figure it out in order, or does it? That's a confirmation bias. Let's see. My confirmation says you don't have to figure them out in order. I need somebody to prove me wrong there, that you have to figure them out in order. I mean, that's how we're going to get through this, right? Okay, I'm going to look at, hi, King Jim. How you doing tonight? Hi, Wally Espinoza. Hi, Davio. Hi. Your ears burning. I said something about you. Hi, Eugene. Hi, RF. Hi, MJ Inzer. I did exactly. I found the blaze and looked down, and bam, it was there. I find it fascinating that TTOTC in interviews solved it rather than the poem, and Jack stumbled upon it. No, he knew the area. He was in the spot. He just had to, the actual pinpoint, because of the broken blaze, and then there it was. I'm not bothered by that. What else did you say? That made me think of one thing, and then there it went. The Seuster, the Suzerino. You know what else I find? Okay. In that interview with Forrest and what's her name? That Santa Fe lady. Oh man, not Margie. I can't remember. How can I not? I've seen it so many times. But anyway, um, they talked about publishing the books, or talked about publishing his own books, and being able to take it right to the printers and going and then and Jack talks about being a vanish, or not a, what is it called, a vain, when you're vain, vanity, a vanity publisher, where you didn't have to follow the rules. Okay, well, I should just let them play out and then I can go with my thought from there. Susie, if Forrest went silent the day after TTOTC with what Jack has said, do you think he would have solved it? I don't know. That's a good question. He just said that he didn't, wasn't it that he used slip up or information that Forrest said in an interview for his confirmation of, Lorraine Mills. Thank you, Uncle Titus. Susie, he knew the area, but because of the broken blaze, it was brute force the ending. That doesn't bother me. There's no way Forrest could have, or for sure, how this was going to be solved. I'm not bothered by that either. That particular. Okay, I need another beer out of my makeshift cooler. Hang on, everybody. Here, I'll play this.
And be happy that we're wiser for it. We have a spot of the.
So did you hear that? We need to be happy we're wiser for it when somebody disproves our method wrong instead of pouty. No pouting, no crying in baseball.
A search area that we've been able to rule out. And it's that kind of openness that we need to practice ourselves if we're going to figure this out. So you can actually use Darwin's own method in your hunt for the treasure. When you notice information that questions your ideas, write it down and force yourself to consider it and return to it more than one time and make sure that you are incorporating that information. And finally, to try to appreciate coincidence for what it is. Realize that coincidences are all around us, and any information that would seem to be evidence in favor of your solve, it's a coincidence until proven otherwise.
Coincidence until proven otherwise. A lot of coincidences. I can poke oh, good night, Eugene. Nice, thanks for stopping in. Oh, movie night for Brian Gates. Okay. Be safe, kind, and positive, and have fun. That's right. That's what we do here. That's how we do. I'm going to try to slam this beer. I should have brought something stronger up here and caught the giggles, and because this is boring material. Let's listen to it.
I think the only way we can get on a firm path is if we are able to find evidence of intent that Forrest Fenn wanted us to use these things as evidence.
Always look for intent. I'm writing that down too as a reminder, putting a star and putting. Okay, so that tells me he found positive intent. Jack found positive intent, and that's how he knew. Always look for intent. It was intention. Okay, let's go.
So the second kind of bias I'm going to talk about is complexity bias. This is another form of bias that's, talked about in psychology. And the definition here is the tendency to favor complex or esoteric explanations to simple ones.
See, and look at that. I love this. I love this idea. The tendency to favor complex or esoteric explanations to simple ones. Like the complication of like, okay, I'm going to use the periodic table, and Einsteinium is number 99, and page 99 has a double X on it. That sounds complicated and not really anything to do with anything. Or is it?
So we know if we sit in a certain chair while we're watching our favorite sports team, we can't actually affect the outcome of the game on a rational level, but we still have the superstition anyway, and we still perform the action. And the reason we do that is it soothes us. It makes us feel better that we have control in the universe. When the reality is we live in a chaotic world that we as individuals don't have a lot of control over ourselves. And our brains seem to have this need to see order and meaning in things. So there's this famous study on pigeons, where pigeons were given pigeon feed at random intervals. And the pigeons would occasionally, knock their head against something, twirl around counterclockwise or something like that when the feed would come out. And if they did this a couple of times while the feed came out, the pigeon would seem to associate that action with getting food. So the pigeon would come up with this little ritual where if it thought turning counterclockwise meant getting food, it would do that over and over and over again until it got the food. And it never was able to appreciate that it just came out randomly. The pigeon's brain was making the pigeon think that it had control over this.
Kind of like people thinking that certain scrapbooks were written for them. And there are some scrapbooks that more than one searcher said, I know this was about me. I know this was about me, when it's the same scrapbook. And then there are confirmed scrapbook entries that are like when Forrest did the dip your toe, or that the one he said to Christy, like next, Christy said, am I walking too far, or like I'm out of shape, or how far, or whatever, too far to walk, that whole quote. And Forrest said, so that that confirmation is there for sure. That's what he was talking. That one was her. But these other obscure ones that people can relate to, I know that was me. He was playing a joke on me. That was an inside joke between me and him. And so that had to be, he was pranking me or teasing me. Oh, I should not have said that word, because we all know better than that. But anyway, there you go. Confirmation bias. When people think that the scrapbooks were about them, when so many people, Forrest had a way of making it seem like,
And so the pigeon ignored evidence to the contrary and just kept doing it over and over. Complexity bias is especially prevalent when we're facing a difficult problem or where there's a dearth of clear feedback. So there's another famous study done on college students who were new to biology, and they were given a set of microscope slides with cells on them, and they were asked to determine if the cells were healthy or injured or sick. And they were told if they guessed correctly, healthy or sick, they would get a green light if they were right and a red light if they were wrong. Well, the study was split into two groups. So one group was getting real feedback. So the green or red lights actually meant if they were right or wrong. And the other group, the lights were random. The green or red light had nothing to do with what they said was right or wrong. And the students were asked to come up with a written method to determine whether the cells were sick or healthy. And halfway through the experiment, the students who got clear, real feedback from the lights came up with a pretty simple and concise method in general for determining sick or healthy. And the students who didn't get clear feedback came up with very complicated, long methods for determining sick or healthy.
And so he's basically saying, we don't have feedback here. We don't get feedback. Only the rare few, there are searchers who did get information directly from Forrest and emails and stuff, but I think I didn't. So I'm thinking a lot of others didn't either. And so when there's no feedback, when you're left with all the possibilities, it gets complex. He's saying if you get feedback, the simpler it becomes. Okay, I'm going to keep going.
And what's so intriguing about this study is that, one student from each of those sides met, and the student with the clear feedback was swayed by the arguments of the student who was getting random feedback. And when they went back to their microscopes after that, both sides, their performance went down. So that just shows us how much our brains like complex solutions to things. It allows us to give up trying to understand the problem on a fundamental level and instead focus on constructing an elaborate explanation.
You know what? Listening to this, it makes me like, he knows way too much about this stuff, man. My confirmation bias is telling me that Jack took some psychology classes. This is a lot of psychology. And yeah, I suppose a med student has to, but where did he learn all this? Huh?
That has its own appealing internal logic with a constructed interconnectedness.
Blah, blah, blah.
All the time about coincidence, and the more likely you are to feel that you're right. So this is the kind of bias that seems to be most striking to Forrest himself. He talks all the time about how people are not simplifying things, how they seem to think it's the problem is much more complicated than it is, or hard to figure out than it is. There's this new quote that people like when there's this new quote that people like when he's in the context of talking about how complicated people try to make things. They're stomping on ants while the elephants are running by. And it seems to be clear that people are ignoring obvious things that are important to the true solve. And the thing is, we have no evidence that he is trying to be obscure with what's important to him or the places that are important to him. He's written 3 memoirs, hundreds of scrapbooks about his life. He wants us to know him. And yet people have these preconceived notions about how difficult this must be. But he dissuades us from using what he calls specialized knowledge.
Okay, so what is this saying? He's used the most simple form of, Jack had to simplify. I mean, Forrest told us that, and Jack is telling us that right now. And that specialized knowledge, he just says don't. That's not going to be something. Okay, I'm just going to keep going.
And a couple of times he has said that people are missing things that are either right beside us or right in front of us.
You know what that made me think of? That made me think of the picture of this. You know, I mean, if you're looking at the big picture, and he talked about, Forrest talked about himself. He talked about why people put dust jackets on books, and it's meant to hide an ugly cover. And you know, he carries on about dust jackets, but when you look at this dust jacket, you know what that is? That's yellow stones. That's a bunch of yellow stones. Okay. That's the most simply, that is the most simple, because that's not, he doesn't show us the treasure. He shows us yellow stones.
That's something that
simple
should really perk up your ears. And I think those are some of the most important quotes in the whole chase.
Better Yellowstone under wood. This wooden Yellowstone under wood. So, and then he's got in the scrapbooks, he's got the Underwood typewriter.
So here are some other quotes of his on complexity bias. The solve is difficult for many searchers because their minds think the clues are tougher to decrypt than they really are. Huh. Some searchers overrate the complexity of the search.
My confirmation bias, I better write this down, is telling me that it's the meaning of the words is where this different interpretation. We've got to figure out how to interpret the poem. And I think going back to the dictionary, seems like a way. I don't know, that might be my confirmation bias again. But that's not overcooking the poem. It's so easy. It's simplified.
Try to simplify if you can. That's good advice. There's no substitute for thinking and planning and observing and looking at maps unless it's the desire to keep it simple. And of course, don't overcook my poem. So there's rampant evidence that at least some important aspect of the winning solve is totally obvious to us. It is simple and clear and straightforward, and there's no subterfuge, as he says. And if your solve is so complicated that there's nothing simple or straightforward about it to the layperson reading The Thrill of the Chase for the first time, it's probably wrong. Based on these quotes, you need simplicity in your solve. So how do we combat complexity bias? Well, the most important thing probably is Occam's razor. All else being equal, the simplest solution tends to be the best one.
Yellowstone. He sent us on a quest to look for a bunch of yellow stones. A chest full of yellow stones. His heart is in Yellowstone. You know, like you take your chest, you know, it's like a, yeah.
And that kind of helps protect us against coincidence as well,
Obvious.
and seeking meaning in things that just don't have meaning. So don't ignore the obvious. In the same way that you're writing down things that go against yourself, you should be writing down things that are obvious. And that seems kind of silly, but it's clear that, you know, there's a distinction between missing things that are obvious and dismissing things that are obvious. I think just based on listening to all the things Forrest has said, it's that
Okay.
we are dismissing the obvious.
Ted Williams, number 9, Davio said, now that is, I am dismissing that. That is not obvious. That is not, you know, like that is coincidence.
And, you know, writing those things down is a way of forcing yourself to deal with the elephants running by. And I think we all kind of sound like conspiracy theorists at one point or another, defending ourselves. But you really don't need to explain more than it is necessary. The only thing we need to explain is where he hid the chest. Anytime people are trying to come up with additional circumstantial evidence of why they may be right, they bring in subjectivity. They bring in, you know, if I was hiding the treasure, I would do this. Or, you know, I found this thing, and because I found it, it must be related. The third type of cognitive bias I'm going to talk about is selective perception bias. This comes to us more from, I think, the business classroom than the psychology classroom. This is a term that
He even says psychology classroom. He has spent some time in a psychology classroom. Undoubtedly. You know, I don't know how many times I've listened to this over and over, you guys. I'm talking double digits. I don't know how many times. Mary Green says, my chest heart is full of Yellowstone. Why did Jack use a photo of the Hunchback of Notre Dame to illustrate his page? This page. Good question. Hi, okay, Larry. Fenway Park, the red seat, section 42, row 37, seat 21. Oh, coincidence. Coinkadink. Coinkadink. That is coincidence. Father on the Banco, chapter 21. Bench. Brown is capitalized because it's an official paint color of the, yes, it is. And Eric Sloan loved brown, absolute favorite color. And the chase is brown. This book is brown. It's brown and gold and black and white. Okay, I'm going to keep going.
They would use more in business, and it has a lot of overlap with confirmation bias. But I'm going to use this more as a way to talk about the preconceived notions that we bring into the chase, what we have before we even started the hunt. Okay,
Yep.
so the definition I have here is people tend to see things based on their particular pre-existing frames of reference and discount or ignore context that suggests otherwise. And probably a lot of different ways you could go with this in the hunt itself, but there are a couple ways I'm going to talk about. The first is what I would call puzzler bias.
And this is where where he's really hammering home the simplest thing, the most obvious thing you can do is probably the way to go. Oh, I'm sorry, you guys, I should have shut. I do think page 15 is a hint, Tavio. But you know what I'm guessing? That it's not the same. The way I think it's probably a hint is probably a different way than you think it's probably a hint, you know? And therein lies both of our confirmation bias. Hey, I see my name from Nomadic Badman says, I'm still reading the book. Did Dan bring up Eric Sloan? I don't think so. But you know what? Oh, I don't have my book with me. It's downstairs. Maybe I should go get it. What I thought was interesting was the notes in the back. He talked about very specific, is that every book talks about what font is used for what and what, you know, like in the Thrill of the Chase, that the color font, or so is it something to do with the text? And Eric Sloan is related to text. Anyway, okay. I'm going to, let's see. I'm going to run downstairs and get my book and be right back, but I'm going to let this play while I run. Let me see. How do I do this? Can I turn my camera off? No, it doesn't matter if my camera's on. Okay, I'm going to play this. Well, I'll be right back.
So many people are drawn to the Fenn treasure hunt because they're interested in treasure hunt books in general, and solving puzzles, and they fail to appreciate that this is a fundamentally different thing. There is no evidence that Forrest Fenn himself is interested in conventional puzzles. You know, he has shared so much of his life and so many stories by this point. If he was interested in puzzles, we would have heard of it by now. We have no evidence of him making puzzles in the past, and he hasn't created any additional puzzles since the release of The Thrill of the Chase. He has not shown any ability in his life into creating any sort of conventional puzzle. And yet a lot of people consider the Fenn treasure hunt or the poem as a puzzle. And it's interesting, if you search puzzle on Terry Scant, it's always in the question posed to him. It's never in his words. He does not seem to consider it a puzzle. And yet, so many of the people who are drawn to this are drawn to its similarity to other treasure hunt books that they've been into, or other puzzles that they may have been successful solving before. And there's a great adage that Forrest himself has used before: to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And that's selective perception bias. We have to figure out what game we're playing. And it's probably important for us to make the distinction between this and other books that have a puzzle in them. I would say that The Thrill of the Chase is a memoir with a chapter about the time he hid a treasure. And then the next chapter is about the time he hid bells in jars. There just aren't a lot of obvious direct elements in the book about the treasure hunt. And if you read the chapter Important Literature, Forrest tells us why he wrote the book. He believes the stories of his life are as good as any in the great Western canon. That's the reason for the book's existence, as stated in the book itself. He does not say in the book, I wanted to hide this treasure chest, so I had to contrive some stories about my life in order to do that. It
Okay.
doesn't really make sense.
I'm back. What'd I miss? Be nice, guys. Who's being mean? Don't be mean. I went down and got my copy of the, because it made me think of this page. You know what? Should I quit sharing screen for a minute? Stop share. Okay. This page, it's at the very back of the book. And it says notes on the type. Is it too blurry? Yeah, it looks like crap. This book was set with Adobe Garamond. Garamond. Designed for the Adobe Corporation by blah, 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 blah. Fonts are based on types first cut by Claude, that guy, circa 1480 to 1561. So why is that normal to add in a book? That level of, so does that mean that, you know, I mean, I'm taking confirmation bias. It just is like, other books don't do that. That's all I have to say. Okay. And Forrest's book definitely talked more about the, or you know, was the type. Share screen. Back to this. Here we go.
I think there's a huge disconnect between the Fenn treasure hunters and Fenn himself. A lot of what he seems to get out of it is continually telling us stories, whether in books or scrapbooks, about his life. You know, most presidents don't write more than one memoir. Even though every day they're in office, they're making history, and so there's a natural audience for that material to learn about those decisions. And obviously, Fenn's audience is very important to him, but that audience can't help but think everything out of his mouth is a hint. What brought them into this was the treasure, not wanting to read some Santa Fe art dealer's memoir.
Great point. It's not, The Thrill of the Chase is a treasure hunting book that he used his life stories to hide the clues in. So it's a different, nobody set out and thought, oh, I want to learn as much as I can about Forrest Fenn. I mean, it was, here's this treasure hunt. Have you heard about the Thrill of the Chase? This guy, blah. And then you want to know about the treasure hunt, you know? And it, see how he is at Forrest. Anyway.
So, of course, on this subject, there's this famous quote, knowing about head pressures, foot pounds, acre feet, Bible verses, Latin, cubic inches, icons, fonts, charts, graphs.
There it is. Icons, fonts, chart. So there it is. Even though I have to put that on my confirmation bias thing and then cross it off because Forrest has already ruled it out.
Graphs, formulas, curved lines, magnetic variation, codes, depth meters, riddles, drones, or ciphers.
Magnetic variations, like the lines on the Too Far to Walk map. Irrelevant.
will not assist anyone to the treasure location, although those things have been offered as positive solutions. Excellent research materials are TTOTC, Google Earth, and/or a good map. And yet people still try to use things like this. It doesn't make sense to me, but it makes sense in the context of this is what people have brought to other puzzles. And so that's what's fun to them. And that's how they want to solve it.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is we can't solve it how we want to solve it. We have to solve it how it's designed to be solved. This second quote here was on Mysterious Writings. The question posed by Jenny for this: had you read any other treasure hunts and their different methods used to hide treasure before deciding to write a poem? Is there a reason why you chose to write a poem? And he says, thanks, Jenny. I have read only about treasures that were hidden by pirates, and I wish I could find one of those. So his point of reference is pirates' buried treasure. It's not any of the so-called treasure hunt books that came before his hunt.
Pirates bury treasure, and pirates have a treasure map with X marks the spot. Right? So our treasure map has to have an X marks the spot. The X is not in the poem. So where is the X?
Very important fact to keep in mind. When you read Jenny Kyle's book, there are all sorts of puzzles on all of the different pages. And that's because that's what she enjoys. That's what she enjoys solving, and that's what she enjoys creating. But there's nothing in the thrill of the chase or any of his subsequent writings or interviews that would make you think he has the same sort of interest.
Offer positive solutions, says Hooley. That one is always positive solutions. I know. That made me think. Thanks for making me think, Hooley. Here's a funny coincidence. When Jens met with him and Fenn told Jens the 8th clue is the blaze and the last clue is look quickly down is the exact same shirt he wore when he met Jack. There's a coincidence. Mm-hmm. But somebody sent me that with pictures. See? Okay, I'm going to go back here.
So why would you try to use methods of solving things that he was probably unaware of before the Fenn treasure hunters came around? So how do you combat puzzler bias?
Okay.
I think you have to force yourself to appreciate that this hunt is different than those other hunts. And you have to try to enjoy that aspect.
Yeah.
And if that's frustrating that you can't use these other skills that you've used in other sorts of puzzles.
Well, and I love this one because I have no skills from any other puzzle at all. So when he says you don't use those skills, so hooray. That actually was one of the big draws in this, is the whole idea that Forrest made us all feel like anybody could do this. Anybody has a shot at this, you know. That is the beauty. Whereas you know, some of those other treasure hunts that are all, you know, I feel like people have such an advantage because they know ciphers and, you know, all those other forms of treasure hunting, and obviously they have years of advantage. That wasn't this puzzle, so
you might want to stop paying so much attention to this one and work on the other treasure hunt books that are out there that are still haven't been found that would.
I love that. Really makes me like Jack. He's like, gently saying, well, if you want to use all your puzzle solving skills, go do a different treasure hunt then. But he says it all sweet and kind of like,
be a better use of those skills. This hunt is really about a man and his eccentric choice of where to die and how to die, and him wanting you to follow in his footsteps. It's a challenge of empathy, and we have to try to see the world through his eyes if we're going to be successful.
God.
So the second big striking thing to me that smacks of selective perception bias is what I would call reader bias.
Okay.
The Thrill of the Chase and his other memoirs are self-published. And so one of the big things we're called to do in this is find the aberrations.
See, here's an aberration. I'm finding is what is it? What was it that Jack heard Forrest say in an early interview that made him go, oh, and this whole thing about him self-publishing, he's making a big important point of this. I think this is a place where I need to pay a little bit more attention to the idea of it being self-published, and that he didn't have to follow the regular format rules of publishing a book. Because don't you think that this bit of information seems kind of, I can't think of the word. I can hear it in my head, but I cannot make my mouth say it.
Figure out what sticks out and how it could be a hint. But the book is a different animal than what we're used to. A lot of the givens of a commercial book just aren't there for a self-published book. So in a commercial book, there are teams of editors and copy editors, proofreaders, that make sure, first of all, there are no mistakes.
See, he just makes such a big deal of this. Oh, here's my name, Huli says, do you think it was the first easy version of the poem? I don't know. I don't know what the slip up. I know what you mean by that, but I don't know. Are you talking about when Preston looked at the poem and said, this is going to be too easy, people are going to figure it out? And then, I don't know. It still makes me think of, it's got to be the definitions of the words. There's got to be a different way to read the poem. And it's got to be in the words he used and the definitions. I'm going back to that. Because why is Jack making it so important for us to know about this particular type of bias, right?
Takes in the book, but also the narrative doesn't stray. The book doesn't get boring. It sticks to its points and to what is interesting and relevant to the reader. Whereas Forrest apparently wrote this sort of stream of consciousness, indulging in any whim that came to him along the way. And of course, these things are going to look like aberrations to us because 99% of what we read in a book looks very different. And if you use that kind of thinking, you're going to find a lot of rabbit holes.
Yes. For instance, why the thrill of the chase, the first page is number 4, when that's the prologue. When other books by other publishers, they would start with Roman numerals. The prologue would be, it would not start with the alpha what are they called? Normal numbers. You know what I mean. Why is it page 4, and why is it not, why doesn't it start with Roman numerals? Like that's what a book publisher would make you do. So, but he's saying that these are all rabbit holes, right?
The One Horse Land and Cattle Company is what's referred to as a vanity publisher. And that's...
So what did he say? Okay, searchers default to preconceived notions. That's the 3rd time he used that preconceived notion, those words, about what published writing looks like, widely opening the possibilities of what can be considered an aberration, thus a hint leading to rabbit holes. Okay, so basically he's saying that the page 4 aberration is just that, and it's a rabbit hole. That's what I'm learning.
It's a pretty derogatory term, but the point is these books are not meant to make money. The point is to get Forrest's work out there, for him to see the book on the shelf and to feel the accomplishment of writing a book without dealing with any of the other issues that come with commercial publishing. And this can be hard to wrap your mind around now that The Chase has gone viral, but there was no expectation that this book would find a large audience. Some people say that...
You know what? I just got, Mary Green said, the check just caught my eye and said, wait, I thought Warm Waters Halt was a hint in a slip up. Am I wrong? No, Mary Green, that's a good point. That's a good point. Because in that New Zealand interview where he said, Forrest said on, live radio that the first clue was where Warm Waters Halt, and that was a slip up. Because I think that the way it was presented was a slip up. Seems like it was a slip up. And that's the only time Forrest ever said that. So, but Jack in this also is saying that all the searchers disregard, because of that, where Warm Waters Halt was the first clue, they disregard the first stanza. And that is a mistake. So there's clearly something, although it's not like the 9 clues are the directions. But that doesn't mean that the beginning of it, the first stanza, doesn't give you an instruction. That's not a clue to one of the locations, Here we go.
The treasure must be in New Mexico because Forrest only sold the books at the Collected Works bookstore in Santa Fe. So he only originally thought of New Mexicans searching for this. But I think that presupposes that he would be able to get a wider distribution for this book. Forrest had published several books to his own admission that barely anyone read, that were not financial successes and were not widely sold. And commercial publishers have relationships with bookstores, large and small, and they're able to get their books in.
This is a very good point. So, Forrest controlled the book sales by having them all funneled through Collective Works bookstore or Collected Work. Oh my God. And he didn't want, just think about that part of it. Why Jack is making a big deal of this, so it has to be a reason. God, that makes me go back to meaning we all have to start in the same place. Using this type of bookstore, because he just said, like his audience, and he funneled all the sales through that one bookstore. Why is that important? Why is that such a big deal? Okay.
Into those stores, a publisher like the One Horse Land and Cattle Company doesn't have any of those resources. Occam's razor would say,
okay,
that one of the main reasons he would bring his book to the Collected Works bookstore was such a sweetheart deal to give them all the profits is, number one, because Forrest likes them and has an existing relationship, and that's how he does things. And number two, that would be his easiest form of distribution.
And this also makes me think of using Borders bookstore in the Thrill of the Chase, and that bookstore no longer even exists, I don't think. Bookstores are disappearing. So is that a part of this? Is that really a big picture thing? Is that books themselves are disappearing?
Just bring these books he made to someone across town. If he had originally brought this memoir to commercial publishers, he probably would not have been very successful. Most memoirs that are published are by either very famous people or very famous writers. And he's accomplished a lot in his life and is probably somewhat of a local celebrity, but he wasn't at that level where he would attract a large publisher.
And so Jack is saying that Forrest published it himself because no big publisher would want him. Really? It seems, Jack being a journalist himself, I don't know why this matters. Is
he probably could have with his subsequent books, but he seemed to be happy with the way he did things. So his quotes on what I'm calling reader bias.
Oh, the King says there was actually 2 Borders in Santa Fe. Really? I think he had to just use the name Borders to draw attention to the borders and borderline biddies. And Jack does talk about in this that borders didn't mean political borders, meaning state borders. park borders, and you know, all those lines drawn, that didn't mean boo to him. So, okay, anyway.
On his process on making the Sharp book, I had a couple people help me because I didn't know what I was doing, and they would edit my work, and I didn't like the way they edited it. I went to see some people who were supposed to know what they were doing, and they did, but they wrote different from me. I decided I didn't want a publisher. I'd just do it myself. And so I did that, and I lost a bunch of money. Too far to walk. When a writer sends a manuscript to a publisher, 2 years later, they're thinking about going to a printer. We did this in 2 days.
Control.
Thrill the chase. I had written 8 books before. Nobody wanted any of my books. My parents were dead. Who's going to buy my books? Last quote really illustrates why it's so difficult to point to something in the thrill of the chase and say, that's not normal. That's an aberration. It's fun to make up words and play with different spellings. When someone calls me out after noticing the corruption of a word I use, I just smile, especially when I say something that in my mind is correct, but in an academic sense, it's a horrible malfunction. This is the kind of guy we're working with here.
Yep.
There's no easy solution to finding an aberration.
Nope.
And determining what the hints are may be the most difficult part of this hunt. So trying to combat reader bias, I don't really know. I would
he does.
Read as much of his work as possible, especially his other memoirs,
really
both in book and scrapbook form, just to try and to appreciate him as a writer, understand his lexicon.
So what I have questions about this, read as much of Fenn's work as possible. How did this guy get his grubby hands on as much of Fenn's work in 3 weeks or whatever it took him to solve this? If he's telling us this is how he did it, learn how he is about that. And he has a quote from the Joseph Henry Sharp book. You know how big that book is? It's huge. It's big and thick and huge. Of course, I'm using my own idea of how long it would take me to read something. That doesn't mean most people can read at a normal pace, right? And so he read all of Forrest's, all the scrapbooks, all the memoirs, The Thrill of the Chase, and figure out the poem in 3 weeks. What? And listen to all the interviews? What?
And figure out what is a departure from his normal writing and what might be an aberration to him. He may have some element of bias himself in that when he's writing and he makes a departure from his normal writing to sprinkle in a hint, it may look like just another whim to us, even though it feels very wrong to him. I have to think he appreciates that and has made sure that he shows his intent in some way when he is making that departure, but it's unclear at this point if he actually does.
Lucky Digger, didn't Jack search before he bought the book? Good question. Do you guys know that? Does anyone have a quote about that from Jack? But didn't a lot of people, God, he sounds way too logical of a thinker too of.
Another thing, look at previous versions of the stories in The Thrill of the Chase that were published elsewhere.
So if he's, and there's another thing, and he's also saying in that time period. He found the original version of My War for Me and compared it to the version in, or all of the stories that were published previously that ended up in the Thrill of the Chase. He took those all and in 3 weeks.
And in doing that, in putting those texts side by side, you can see some of his writing process in action. It's sort of, how people study Shakespeare's folios. See how he edits himself, how he has changed, how he's presenting himself in this book. And maybe between the lines, you can find some evidence of that intent. A lot of the stories that were originally published in the West Yellowstone News that are now available on the Bozeman Daily Chronicle website have quite a few edits. I mean, it's often, a word or two each paragraph that add up over the course of this story. It's kind of striking that My War for Me, which is probably about a third of the book, is almost entirely intact. Copy and paste job from its original form. There's only some very light editing at the very beginning. For me, that pretty much rules out My War for Me as having a hint.
What do you guys think of that? That is a hard, just because of the tombstone that was knocked over by the waterfall. And then later I equate that to the chapter where, or the, I forgot what I was saying, whatever, the war for, the Rosetta Stone, the Bells chapter, and the mention of the Rosetta Stone, and having different languages involved on the Rosetta Stone. And that's the same story as the War for Me chapter, with finding a French soldier with English words.
Unless he has a time machine, I can't see how he would have planted a hint in the text that he is left completely unchanged from years before. So those are probably the two biggest examples of selective perception and bias that I've seen in the chase, but I'm sure there are a lot of different angles you could take with this if there are other...
It right here. Okay, so it's an opportunity for planting a hint in the text. Hi, Angeline Jolie. So is that where Jack is telling us where he found the hints in the book? He's there. Let's boil this information down. Let's boil it down to Jack is saying planting a hint in the book, in the text, is the difference from one story to another, or the same story published previously. So isn't that the Firehole Madison River missing from the Flywater story? What else? What are the other? Is that what we're supposed to be looking at? And okay, I don't know. I'm done with this, you guys. We all get it. Only because, and I'm saying I'm done with this because I've listened to this so many times. But every time I do, I feel like I take away something, or I get to know Jack better, or how his approach to this and what he's using as important in this video very well could be exactly what telling us what was important to solving it. He, as far as we know, he's the one, and he's the only one. I wish I had an anti-anxiety affirmations book written by you. Oh, funny. I am full of anxiety. I have no clue how to do anti-anxiety except for, various alcohol and drugs. Right. But you guys, it's already 10:30. I think I'm gonna close her down for the night and leave you all just with that. Where I can't not want to continue this. I want to solve the poem. I want to use this confirmation bias video to help me figure out how he did it. And I want to be able to let this go. I think that's how we're going to have to do it. But I'm going to push some buttons and end it here. And I thank you all so much. Whether you're live in the chat and all 6 people, or you're watching this tomorrow, thanks for stopping in and spending your Friday or your time with me. There's lots of choices in the chase, and yeah, see you.